All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm back with a guest who has been on the show before, and before we started recording here, we were trying to figure out when it was. It was somewhat recently, but time in this like post-pandemic era doesn't exist anymore. But you're back on the show, and I think to start this off, the best way to do that is for you to introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what you do as an artist.
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Desiree Dorion. I make my home in Dauphin, Manitoba, which is in Treaty 2. I'm also a member of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation, which is in Treaty 5. And I have worked primarily in the country music genre throughout almost the entirety of my career. I just released my seventh studio album on, oh gosh, September 20th. And it's a marked departure from what I've done in the past. It's sitting more in the roots Americana world.
Yeah, and I was listening to the album before we started doing this conversation, and I really like it. I think it. I think that you definitely suit that style. I mean, I know before you were very much like capital C country music with
Yeah,
pop elements, and this is a lot more. I mean, as you said, it's a lot more roots Americana style, but it's a lot more. It almost seems more storytelling, more lyric driven, more kind of intimate, I guess, than some of your maybe more bigger produced country stuff, if that makes sense.
yeah, totally, totally makes sense. And
So
that
what
was
was
all done intentionally.
that was my next question. Yeah. So what was the sort of decision to go that way? Because I think it really works with your voice and with your songwriting. But why did you choose to make that shift? This far into your career.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason why is because I am far into my career. And I mean, let's be honest, when we're looking at um, women in country music, we're not seeing middle-aged women anywhere. And so, I'm not blind. I took a look in the mirror one day and I thought, okay, we're going to need to make a shift here or something's got to give because we're not getting any younger. And when you go to folk festivals and you watch what's happening in the folk roots world, Americana world, it's okay for women to age in those genres and to be human and get older. And so I just knew that I needed to make that shift of longevity in my career and keep doing what I love doing.
It's that's unfortunate that is the case. I mean, I'm glad you made this shift because I think it works really well with your sound. But it sucks that is something you have to consider. I mean, I think that men playing country music that's not it doesn't matter, right? It's a shame that that's part of the consideration. But I mean, is this something you stylistically were sort of leaning towards anyway?
Yeah, I mean, uh, honestly, the consideration in relation to my age was first and foremost. Like I was very much aware of this even 5 years ago that I wasn't going to be able to work much longer in the country music world. I wasn't going to have, much more commercial success than I've already had because I've kind of crossed over the rainbow, so to speak. So that was really the primary consideration. And then when I started paying attention to, what I was writing, I realized that I'm first and foremost a songwriter,
Yeah.
and I realized that um, I was starting to explore more deeper topics, like the song Greta, for instance, being a song about domestic violence and things that you can't necessarily always get away with in the country music world. And so I realized that if I followed that path, that I would have a lot more creative liberties in the Americana roots world than I did in mainstream country.
Okay, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that one thing that's interesting in listening to the record is, I mean, I know you come from again the country world, a lot of pop influence there as well, and I think that this record it's still evident you know how to write hooks. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's more intimate, it's more rootsy, it's more toned down, but the big choruses and stuff are still there. It's just a different way of sort of going about it. Is that something that you do deliberately, or something you just can't avoid in terms of how you write songs?
I think it's something I just can't avoid at this point. I mean, I feel like I've been in this box in terms of lyrical structure my entire life. And now it's just like, okay, what makes sense? Verse, chorus, bridge, maybe no bridge. Um, and then what is the hook? What are we talking about? We always have to come back to that, for me at least when I'm writing, I always want to come back to that hook um, in the chorus. So yeah.
It's just there. It's there in the background no matter what. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
what has the reception been to this? Because I mean, this is your seventh album. You have six previous records in that previous style. How has your audience reacted to the shift?
Really well so far, I think. I've gotten a boatload of messages on social media platforms saying, like, this is so different than what you've done previously. We love it. Um, we charted top 10 first week out on Canadian iTunes, which means people bought it right out of the gate, which was pretty cool. Um, and we're doing really well. I've got a release party coming up tomorrow in my hometown, and um, tickets are selling and people are coming. And so I think the reception has been really good so far.
Cool. That's what you want, especially after doing a shift, right? You want to make sure that people are still on board, but it sounds like they are, which is great. As
Yeah.
far as is this sort of the is this now the direction you want to continue heading? I mean, now that you've put these songs out, they're out in the world, people can hear them, you're getting reaction. Do you think that this is sort of the focus going forward?
I mean, I think it has to be. I think that there's no going back at this point. I don't feel like, and quite candidly, I mean, I feel in hindsight that I had really been trying to fit myself into a box that I didn't fit into.
Sure.
And you can see themes of that even in the stuff that I've done previously, like my Tough Street record. I mean, that sits definitely more in the roots Americana world than it ever did in the pop country world. And oddly enough, Whiskey Nose off that record is the very first song that ever charted for me in country music.
Okay.
And so I feel almost like had I just followed my instincts right from like right from, when I started being more honest, I guess, in my writing, maybe I would have had more commercial success. But I think of songs like a flower off of the Tough Street record, or Love You to Death off of my That's How I Know record, or Break the Chain off of Break the Chain album. All of these songs that tell honest stories and speak authentically are songs that I've had success with. And so I think that that's been a real lesson for me in creating this album, that honesty is always the best way to go, no matter what kind of genre you're trying to work in. That's going to be what is going to resonate with people, is if you're being honest about who you are as an artist, as a writer, as a creative, and relaying those messages in the most honest way possible.
Well, I think it's interesting. I agree with you for sure, and I think it's interesting that country music, sort of the two sides of it, the pop side, and then the more, I guess, honest, genuine, old school roots, whatever you want to call it, side of things. And it seems like that honesty and that genuineness is much more important on that side than it is on the pop side. Because you listen to a lot of pop influenced country now, and it's really maybe a fiddle away from being just a regular pop record.
Yeah.
Whereas, rootsier stuff, there's an authenticity to it. People want to have that kind of lived in, naturalistic vibe to it, I think.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
How do you I mean, you have this big catalog of six previous albums. How do those songs work when you're playing live now? Because I mean, there's an obvious difference. Are you sort of morphing some of those old pieces of music into more of a roots Americana sort of sound, or are those sort of distinctly your country era, I guess, and you're playing them as written?
Yeah, no, we're still playing them as written. And I still have country songs as part of my live set, like even
Yeah.
even cover songs. Um, but I also have a lot of songs that sit in the roots Americana world that I've never released. And
Okay.
so when I'm doing a live show, I incorporate some of those songs that people have never heard before, just because I want to practice. I want to try them out live and see what the feedback is in any event. And they might eventually become cuts, they might not, but um, it's just I do that more for exploratory purposes than anything. But yeah, no, we're still playing a lot of the old stuff.
Cool. And are those songs that you're not sure what's going to happen with them? Are those songs that you were maybe hesitant to release earlier because of being in that box that you felt you were in?
Totally. Yeah.
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 So how do you what was the process like to sort of get past that? Because I imagine, doing something like this, obviously, yes, you're doing more sort of genuine you songs, but it's a big move, right? I mean, how much work was it, I guess, to go from what you were doing before to this now? And I don't want to spend the whole time talking about sort of the differences between the two eras of your career, but I mean, it is a big shift, and I think it's like, as a listener, I think it works out for the better. But well, how do you kind of wrap your mind around sort of changing after having this whole long period of time doing one thing?
I'm not sure that I really have yet. I mean, I've never worked in this genre. You know, I'm trying to open doors now in the folk world that I've never been a part of, and so
Yeah,
I'm kind of learning as I go. And you know, I don't know that I'm gonna get it all right. I might spend, you know, a couple albums trying to get my teeth, you know, sink my teeth into this before I finally figure out what the hell I'm doing.
sure.
Um, yeah, so it's kind of I'm learning as I go, and I'm trying to build a new team around this new shift so that I can, you know, get the help that I need to, you know, keep working, because that's really ultimately for me what it comes down to is I want to work for as long as I possibly can, doing what I love to do. Like at the end of the day, this is still fun for me. This is still
Yeah,
I'm still passionate about, you know, making music and creating songs and putting songs together like a puzzle piece. And I'm still passionate about sharing that publicly with people. And for as long as I'm still having fun doing that, I want to do it.
yeah. I think that's that's the best reason to keep making music, right? Is if you're personally enjoying it for sure.
Right.
Um, with these songs on this record, how long have they been in the works? Or some of these songs kind of date back to just because you mentioned a few minutes ago about having these songs you weren't sure what to do with. Are some of the songs on this record sort of in that vein?
Yeah. Two of the songs off the album, Greta, I had written that maybe 3 years ago with Steve Mitchell. And then Angel, I wrote that about the same time, 3, 4 years ago.
Okay.
The other four tracks, I was in Nashville in December. I went for a writing trip, and I knew I was going intentionally. In fact, I shot the cover shot or the cover, the album cover in August last year, you know, manifesting already what I wanted this record to sound like. I wanted it to be literally stripped down, raw, organic, vulnerable. Um, you know, and so when I was thinking about all of those things in the sound that I wanted uh, to go along with that, I thought, what better way than to shoot it naked?
Yeah.
And so we shot the album cover in August last year, before I even had all of the songs written.
So
And then
you knew where you were headed.
I knew exactly where I wanted to go. When I went to Nashville in December, you know, I shared that with some of the writers that I had gone in. I had an album cover already. I had the ideas in terms of the sound that I wanted to achieve. And, and I had my little book of ideas, you know, and so I'd go into these writes and I'd say, you know, this is like the lead single Ghost. I went into that write with Jesse Slack, and all I had was the chorus melody, the oh, oh, oh. And so we built everything around that chorus melody because I just felt like I didn't even have a word. You
Yeah.
know, all I had was that melody. And I said, I think that this sounds really cool. And we can make it, you know, kind of haunting. And as we talked it through, you know, the Ghost was the end result. But um yeah, I had a bunch of ideas going into those writes. And then I came home, of course, with 5 or 6 new songs that I had to choose from to make
Yeah.
this make the final cut.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the album cover because I think that even the black and white aspect of it really kind of adds to like it's very it very much explains what's on the record, right? I mean, the acoustic guitar, the stripped downness, the black and white photo, it's you know, it's very obvious. I guess like it's kind of beating the listener over the head with like this is what this is. This is not what you're used to. This is now this version of what you're doing. So I think it totally suits it. It totally fits. That the way you described writing the song there, is that usually how you write? Is it based on melodies or do you typically
No,
no?
no, I don't play guitar. Like I play enough to get by
Yeah.
to just, you know, write a basic bare bones song. All the fancy stuff comes in later in production, but you know, and sometimes I'll just sit in my room with my guitar and write verse chorus, and then I'll take that as an idea, and then some of the chords change because I'm not, you know, I'm limited to what I can do on a guitar.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like when I wrote my very first record, my first two actually, my when I was 14 and then my 2010 album, I couldn't play anything at that point in time. Like I couldn't even, you know, play a D chord.
Yeah.
And so I went in to production and I had songs in my head that I would literally just sing to my producer,
Okay.
and they would put music to the melody. Um, so that still happens for me sometimes, and Ghost was an example of that. Typically, I would say now I lead with lyrics, 9 times out of 10.
Is it I mean, with this record and with like we just discussed the kind of stripped down nature, with the intimate nature of it, was it difficult to get some of these songs out? Because you're talking about personal things, because you're talking about not that your other songs didn't deal with serious issues or anything like that, but just the stripped downness of it. It's very much more direct to the listener, I think, than something with bells and whistles, if that makes sense. Is it was it harder to get those songs out, or was that sort of a relief almost to get those songs out and be able to kind of approach songwriting that way?
Um, the best way I can describe that is that it has always been like therapy.
Sure.
And writing these songs are just the songs that made the final cut. There were a bunch more to choose from. But going through that writing process over the last year was like going to the frickin' emergency room. And it brought so much solace and comfort to me to be able to, um, turn what was happening for me personally into art, and to be able to turn to music and put pen to paper and, uh, have that release, and ultimately that relief to help
Yeah.
process whatever what it was that I was going through. And um, yeah, it was. I mean, there were moments that were hard because I want to be respectful in all aspects of my creativity, and I don't want to be someone who's disrespecting and shitting on anybody. Um, so there was a lot of, I would say, internal conflict on that front. But overall, the writing process for me, like I said, was like going to the emergency room.
What does it feel like when you're done that? Once the album's finished and you've gone through that emergency room for however long it took you to get from point A to point B? I mean, that's going to be a huge relief, right? To have this, but then I guess you have the uncertainty of what happens afterwards and how people are going to
Yeah,
interpret it, things like that.
totally, on all fronts. I mean, I would be totally lying if I said it, if I said that I wasn't scared. Um, I'm terrified with this album. I'm terrified about the genre shift. Are my listeners going to follow me on this trip?
Yeah,
I'm terrified about the album cover. I'm 40 years old posing naked. I've received some criticism for that online.
really.
Um, yeah,
What's the issue with that? Like, I mean, it absolutely suits the music, I think.
I was called a prostitute last week. Trying to pose naked to entice men into my world and then reject them when I bait them in. I think was the comment made on that.
But you have a
Um,
guitar, like, like it's not. Yeah, that's
Listen,
yeah.
I wouldn't have released it the way that I did if I thought it was trashy and
Of course,
if I couldn't stand behind it. I'm a mother of two daughters. So, I endeavor to be a good role model for them. Um, I try and emulate body confidence. I try and uh, be confident in who I am as a woman. I realize that they're watching me and they're watching everything I do. They see my album cover, they see my bare ass on the floor in that album shoot. And so, there's no getting around that. I mean, it's something that I consciously chose to do, and it,
yeah.
it certainly wasn't for the sake of baiting men. But I expected that. I expected that not everybody would see my point of view, in terms of why I did that. And um, for me as an artist, I really appreciated the artistic aspect of, the metaphorical aspect of stripping it all away,
Yeah,
getting rid of the noise. And this record is thematically about self-discovery and rediscovery. I don't think any of us as humans stay stagnant. We're constantly growing and evolving. And that's what this was about for me. It was about rediscovering this new person that I am.
yeah,
And I think in order to do that, I had to do a lot of stripping away. I had to get into some of those layers and peel back some of those layers in order to figure out, who the hell am I, and what do I want to do, and what kind of music do I want to share with people. And so, there was a lot of thought that went into that, and I very much made that decision consciously, and I stand behind it. Damn it.
good. Yeah, you should for sure.
Yeah.
What happens next? I mean, I know you said you have a release show happening in your hometown. At the time we're recording this, it's been like a week and a bit, I guess, since the record came out. What's the plans for the relatively near future?
Yeah, I have a couple of release parties, like you said, coming out. I'm booking already into December, which is great. I'm really, really working hard to hit the folk root scene next summer. Um, I've got a great team of people who are helping me. So yeah, we're hitting the pavement hard, yeah, it's so far it's been really well received at radio, which is great.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, and just I hope that continues.
With the folk roots scene, I mean, especially here in Manitoba, it's such a huge genre of music, and obviously across Canada and elsewhere. But do you feel like you have to sort of introduce yourself fresh to that community? Because I'm sure
Totally.
some there's some crossover for sure between folk and country, and some people might know the name or might have heard some of your previous records, just seen you live. But does it feel like a sort of a completely fresh start where you have to sort of make yourself known to that audience?
Totally. Totally. Like I feel like I'm starting from scratch. In some ways I feel like I'm 25 again, trying to navigate this entirely new world.
Yeah,
Um, there is some crossover with country and roots Americana, but I've worked exclusively in country,
yeah,
and the little bit of crossover that I've had has come exclusively from these like little nuggets of songs that I've created and that exist in my catalog now. But really, like I've never worked in the folk roots scene. And so, finding out where do I showcase even as a folk roots artist and learning about, Folk Alliance International or FMO, like Folk Music Ontario. And yeah, just like introducing myself to people in this world that I've never really spent a whole lot of time in.
yeah, definitely. Do you think that this record is I mean, I'm sure you do, but do you feel like this record is a good introduction to this side of you? Like, do you think it sort of showcases what you wanted to show of your songwriting in this mold?
Totally. I had worked with Joel Shorts produced this album. And I had worked with him on my 2017 record. He did a lot of the guitar work on that album. And if you listen to that album, you can hear the similarities,
Okay,
between what he brought as a player on that project to what he brought this time as a producer. And when I was really thinking about the sound that I wanted to capture, I wanted it to be very organic, very natural. Um, and I remembered playing with him on my Tough Street album, and I remembered thinking to work with at some point. And we had kind of kept in touch over the years, and it just felt like now was the right time. And we had met, I guess, late last year and talked through what I wanted to do. I told him exactly. I had already had the photo shoot done, and we had talked it through. And I said, I've got a couple of songs that I think we could work from. I think I sent him a Dropbox link with about 30 songs. I
okay,
said I'm going to Nashville in December, and I hope to beat what I've got. And if I do, we'll revisit what I've got in the can. Um, and that's what we did. And we started. I think my first trip to to Toronto to lay down vocal tracks was in January. So yeah, it's been about an 8 month journey. Visiting this work and spending time with this work, and I am really proud of how this album turned out.
well, now it's completely out of your hands, right? Now it's out in the world, so you have to rely on other people and
I've
the
got
way
no
that they
choice.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's not up to me anymore.
Well, like I said, I really like it. I think it's I have a few of your albums, your previous albums, and this might just be my personal preference style wise, but I think this suits what you do for sure.
Thank
Um,
you.
where can people hear this? I mean, I know that we're in this weird dystopian future where no one listens to music the same way, and there's all these various ways people can hear stuff. Where would you send someone if they wanted to hear your music and for the first time?
Well, I mean, I'm on all streaming platforms, just like every other artist.
Yeah,
I do have physical copies, physical CDs,
cool.
for anybody that's still listening to that. And I'm also in the process of I'm waiting on my vinyl, so
Oh,
I'm
nice.
doing this one in vinyl for the first time, which I'm really excited about.
I think that this style too suits that. I mean, I think the folk community, the roots Americana, there's so many artists who are putting out vinyl. And I think yeah, it's. I mean, as someone who listens to physical music pretty much exclusively, I always like hearing that because there's
Yeah,
still a few of us who are listening to CDs and tapes and records, and we're out there, maybe small in numbers, but it's always nice to see artists putting in that extra level of sort of it makes it more special for I think the listener to get a copy of something and have the liner notes and have the lyrics and have
Yeah.
the photography and everything like that. So it's like a dwindling thing, but it's always cool to see.
I'm the same way, you know, I mean, I say I'm a songwriter first, but even before that, I was a music fan.
Yeah, yeah,
And, you know, when I consume music now, I mean, when I'm traveling, it's a bit of a different story, but if I'm at home, like I love holding a physical product.
me too.
And, you know, like you say, looking at the liner notes, who wrote that song and who played on this album or whatever the case might be. And so there's something, I don't know if it's nostalgic. It feels nostalgic now because most people don't consume
Yeah.
music in that way anymore.
Well, I think that's how I always found my favorite artists is looking at liner notes and saying, "Who wrote this song?" And it's not one of the guys in the band I'm listening to, so it must be someone from a different band. Who are they? Or who's the
Right.
guitar player? I love this sound. Where are they from? And I
Right.
don't know if that happens as much anymore. I guess it's easier to look up now, but if you don't have
Yeah,
the liner notes in front of you, you're not going to even notice that this is a different person or this song was written by whoever it was written by. So
exactly.
I don't know. I think it's just me, like old man yells at clouds kind of thing. But it is nice. It is nice. And then as far as this is a podcast. It'll come out soon after we have this conversation, but someone could hear it a year from now, whenever. What's the best way to find out what you're up to as far as shows, as far as maybe new music by the time someone finds this, things like that?
Yeah. Uh, my website is a good option, although that said, I haven't updated it. I'm guilty about that, so I need to get that done ASAP. Um, Probably Instagram, Facebook. I'm also really accessible. Like if people message me, I do my best to respond. I don't get it right all the time. There's only so many hours in a day, but I am very accessible, and I do that intentionally. I think that I've managed to build a really great group of people who, you know, follow along with me and are invested in me, and I think that that might be why, because I'm invested in my audience. And you know, if people are taking the time to listen or consume my music in some way, shape, or form, then I want to be respectful and give them the time of day as well. So you know, Instagram, I'm at Desiree Dorion. Facebook, I'm at Des Dorion. TikTok, I'm at the Desiree Dorion. Yeah, so on all the things.
Look for your name. People should be able to find you.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.